What if I told you that Canada and the US, once inseparable trade partners, are now on the brink of an economic divorce? That what started as a simple tariff dispute has spiraled into a global power shift, where China is stepping in to claim what Washington thought was untouchable. This isn't just another trade disagreement. It's a battle for dominance, for control over oil exports, supply chains, and economic influence. And here's the real kicker. Canada, the US's most loyal partner for decades, might be turning its back on Washington and looking east instead. The stakes? Billions of dollars, decades of alliances, and the future of North American trade. With the Trans Mountain Pipeline redirecting oil exports to Asia and China strengthening its grip, Canada is making moves that could rewrite the rules of global trade forever. But is this a smart strategy or a dangerous gamble? And more importantly, what does the U.S. plan to do about it? Stick around, because once you see what's happening behind closed doors, you'll never look at Canada-U.S. relations the same way again. When a superpower flexes its muscles, the world watches. But when that flex threatens its closest neighbor, that's when things explode. In February 2025, President Trump dropped a bombshell. A 25% tariff on Canadian imports and a 10% tariff on energy products, blaming everything from illegal immigration to the fentanyl crisis. But let's be real, this wasn't just about securing borders. This was a power play, a calculated move in a high-stakes trade war that sent shockwaves through Canada-U.S. relations. Overnight, businesses scrambled, consumers panicked, and the once stable North American trade system? Well, it suddenly felt like quicksand. But here's the kicker. Canada didn't just take the hit. No way. This was personal. Prime Minister Trudeau had a choice. Bow to Washington's pressure or fight back with tariffs of his own. And oh, did he fight back? With billions of dollars at stake and an economy hanging in the balance, Canada's response was swift, strategic, and, let's just say, not what Washington was expecting. Because this wasn't just a trade war anymore, it was about to become something much, much bigger. If you thought Canada would sit back and take the hit, think again. Within days of Trump's tariff blitz, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau struck back hard. Canada unleashed a 25% tariff on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods, targeting everything from beer and bourbon to clothing and appliances. And that was just round one. Behind closed doors, whispers grew louder. If things escalated, Canada was ready to expand these tariffs to a staggering $125 billion. This wasn't just about trade anymore. This was a warning shot, a clear message that Washington's move wouldn't go unanswered. And for American businesses? Oh, they felt it immediately. But here's the wild part. This was just the beginning. As tensions boiled over, global markets held their breath, wondering how far both sides would go before the economic pain became unbearable. Would the U.S. double down? Would Canada push even further? Or was there a hidden card waiting to be played? One thing was clear. The stage was set for an all-out trade war, and the stakes were only getting higher. Want to be ahead of the curve while the world scrambles to keep up? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because in this game of power, those who know the moves first win. Just when it seemed like the trade war was about to spiral out of control, something unexpected happened, a temporary ceasefire. Behind the scenes, high-stakes negotiations unfolded, leading to a 30-day pause in the escalating tariffs. But make no mistake, this wasn't a moment of goodwill. Canada had to make serious concessions, including tightening border security, appointing a fentanyl czar, and forming a joint strike force with the U.S. In other words, Washington got what it wanted, at least for now. The question was, how long would this fragile truce last? Markets breathed a sigh of relief, but economists weren't buying the Peace Act. They knew these agreements were often band-aids on bullet wounds, delaying the inevitable rather than solving the root problem. And let's be real, tariffs of this scale don't just vanish overnight. While politicians shook hands, businesses remained on edge, bracing for what could come next. Would this pause turn into a long-term solution? Or was it just a ticking time bomb waiting to detonate? For those thinking this trade war was just political theater, think again. The economic shockwaves were immediate. Prices soared, supply chains tangled, and industries that had thrived on seamless Canada-U.S. relations suddenly found themselves in chaos. Tariffs aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They hit where it hurts, at the checkout counter, in manufacturing plants, and in the pockets of everyday people. Economists warned that if these policies stuck, the long-term economic impact would be devastating. But here's the thing. This wasn't just about Canada and the US. The ripple effect was global. As businesses scrambled to adapt, Canada began rethinking its entire trade strategy. If the US was no longer a reliable partner, where else could it turn? That's when eyes shifted toward Asia, particularly China, a move that would shake up the balance of power in global markets. The stakes had never been higher, and the world was watching. And if you want to stay ahead of these seismic shifts in the global economy, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the next move, it could change everything. With tariffs squeezing trade routes and Canada-US relations growing tense, Ottawa made a bold move, reducing its reliance on U.S. oil exports. For decades, the U.S. had been Canada's primary customer, absorbing 98% of its crude oil exports. But now, the dynamic was shifting fast. Instead of waiting for Washington to loosen its grip, Canada accelerated its pivot toward Asia, especially China. The newly expanded Trans Mountain Pipeline, completed in 2024, became the backbone of this strategy, now running at 80% capacity to fuel demand overseas. This wasn't just an economic adjustment, it was a geopolitical statement. By diversifying its oil markets, Canada was breaking free from U.S. dependence, sending a clear message. If Washington wanted to play hardball, Canada had other options. And the numbers didn't lie. Oil shipments to China and other Asian markets surged, solidifying new trade routes that bypassed traditional North American corridors. But could this shift truly last? Or was Canada stepping into a new set of challenges that it hadn't yet considered? As Canada-US relations frayed, Asian markets saw an opportunity and seized it. With Canada actively reducing its reliance on the U.S., demand for its crude oil surged across China, Japan, South Korea, and Brunei. These nations weren't just passive buyers. They were strategic players, eager to diversify their own energy supplies amid global instability. The result? A massive shift in oil exports, with tankers rerouting across the Pacific instead of heading south to American refineries. China, in particular, emerged as a dominant player, strengthening its grip on the global energy game. This wasn't just about selling oil. It was about Canada redefining its place in the world economy. By securing long-term agreements with Asian buyers, it was no longer at the mercy of U.S. policy shifts and trade war escalations. But here's the twist. While Canada gained leverage, it also deepened its reliance on a new set of power players. Could shifting away from the U.S. truly mean greater independence? Or was this just trading one dependency for another? Canada has always been an energy powerhouse, but now it was stepping into a new global role. With the third largest oil reserves on the planet, it had long been the fourth largest oil producer. But here's the kicker. 98% of its oil exports had gone to the U.S. That number was rapidly dropping. With the Trans Mountain Pipeline ramping up and Asian markets hungry for energy, Canada was no longer just an American supplier. It was becoming a key global oil player, shifting the balance of power in ways few had predicted. The numbers told the story. 81% of Canadian oil was still going to the U.S., but that figure was shrinking fast. The world was watching because this shift didn't just affect Canada. It had massive economic impacts for global energy markets. Would the U.S. retaliate? Would Canada fully embrace China and other Asian buyers? Or was this the beginning of a new era in oil exports, where Canada held the bargaining power it had never had before? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was, Washington was paying attention. While the trade war with the U.S. escalated, China was quietly winning. As Canada looked for alternative markets, China became a top destination for its exports, with trade between the two nations soaring past $25.4 billion in 2022 and growing. Canola, iron, and crude oil led the charge, reinforcing China's role as a dominant economic partner. The timing couldn't have been more strategic. With Washington tightening its grip through tariffs, Beijing welcomed Canadian goods with open arms, cementing itself as a reliable buyer in the face of U.S. unpredictability. But was this a win for Canada or a dangerous gamble? The deepening economic ties with China raised eyebrows, particularly among policymakers who feared over-reliance on an increasingly assertive Beijing. After all, shifting oil exports was one thing, but restructuring entire trade relationships? That was a high-stakes move with consequences yet to unfold. Would Canada find itself trading one economic leash for another? Or was this the bold pivot that would secure its place as a truly independent global player? So now you know, The Canada-US trade war isn't just about tariffs or oil exports. It's about power, influence, and the future of global trade. Canada is making moves that were unthinkable just a few years ago, and China? It's watching and waiting. The US, once Canada's biggest trade partner, might soon find itself replaced. The question is this a brilliant shift toward independence or a risky bet that could backfire? But here's the real takeaway. You just uncovered a hidden layer of global politics that most people have no idea about. And if this is just one piece of the puzzle, imagine what else is happening behind the scenes. Want to be part of the select few who truly understand how the world works? Then hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep exploring, because knowledge like this, it's power.